Ms. Jackson, stand, raise your right hand, be ready to be sworn. Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Also, you heard the closing argument by your attorney, Mr. Bark, in regards to the murder was committed and indicating that a murder was committed, that it was conducted by Scott Love, not yourself, and you heard that.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't want to know the exact conversation, but did you discuss the strategies of the closing argument with your attorneys?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you satisfied with the closing argument that was conducted and the strategy that was provided by your attorney during the closing argument today?
Yes, ma'am.
Bill Scheiner just sent out his prosecutor, Stewart Stone, to produce lies in court again. The lie this time is that Mandi Jackson's lawyers tried so hard to get her to testify, but she refused to. And the specific reason they're giving is because she was loyal to Scott Love. I don't know the ramifications, either way, how this helps or hurts Mandi. This is not my game. It's not my, it wouldn't be my strategy. But the point is just that Bill Jesus Scheiner is sending out a prosecutor to produce false narratives in court, as usual. I got like a half dozen ways that I know that what Stone is trying to get the court to believe is false. But before I get to that, I want to give you some background in this case. The only proof they have that this crime was planned by Scott Love is they made it look like Scott was wearing latex gloves, which indicates premeditation. And the way they did that is they found 3 gloves with Mulrenin's DNA on them and 5 gloves with Scott Love's DNA on them. And the CSI said at trial that the 3 gloves didn't exist. It was all the same gloves, and she had 5 gloves with Scott Love's DNA on the inside and Mulrenin's DNA on the outside, making it look like Scott Love put on gloves with a plan to go commit some, heinous crime wearing gloves to avoid detection. It wasn't just that CSI Smolarek made it look like there was these 5 gloves with Scott's DNA on the inside and Mulrenin's DNA on the outside. It's that Scott then went up there and made some crazy story to try to explain this because his lawyer couldn't figure out what had happened. Like, his lawyer knew it was a scam, but his lawyer didn't know what to say. So Scott went up there and made up some crazy story to try to explain this, which there is no way to explain because it didn't happen. And the story was so crazy that the jury just punished Scott for not explaining this to them. Because up to that point, the jury wasn't really certain that Scott Love had committed some crime. But when he went up there and just made up some crazy story to try to explain these gloves, which he couldn't because it never happened, the jury punished him for it. Once you've established using these fake glove evidence that Scott Love planned a crime, wearing latex gloves, the only way to prove that Mandi was in collusion with Scott Love is video of her at Walmart using the dead guy's credit card. So in other words, these gloves, which were faked, prove Scott Love must have planned this crime, and Mandi, being all friendly with Scott at Walmart while they're using the dead guy's credit cards, proves that Mandi must have been in collusion with Scott's premeditated plan to kill Mulrenin wearing gloves. And here's the video of that. This fake evidence of gloves with Scott's DNA on the inside and Mulrenin's DNA on the outside, and this video of Mandi using the credit cards at Walmart with Scott was basically accepted at this hearing, is the entire evidence that Scott planned a robbery and that Mandi colluded with him. So if we can fake evidence with this guy's DNA on the inside and this guy's DNA on the outside, and we can show that this girl was using stolen credit cards at Walmart with this guy, that proves that this guy planned a robbery and this girl colluded with him. And they pretty much, they didn't even go outside that at the hearing, and for as dumb as it was, they boiled it down to that pretty good. Mandi's lawyers were witnesses for the prosecution at this little hearing where the prosecutor Stone produced these lies, and they basically said 4 things. 1, Mandi never told them what actually happened that night, and they never asked her. 2, the only way they found out what happened that night was from their prosecutor friends and from gossip. So in other words, they have this belief about their client, what happened that night, that didn't come from their client, but came from the prosecution. So the prosecution is telling them what really happened that night, not their client. 3, that they tried to beg Mandi to just testify against Scott Love or just to take a deal, testify against Scott Love, but she refused to. And 4, that the problems with her testimony was that she was going to say that she was angry at Scott Love and she had nothing to do with this, but there was video of Mandi, cruising around riding a shopping cart while using the dead guy's credit cards at Walmart. Okay, right there's a problem. Mandi was not riding the shopping cart at Walmart. Scott Love was. Now, the point is taken that this video doesn't look good for Mandi, but the bigger point, or that what you learn from this, is that Mandi's own lawyer is willing to tell false narratives not based on evidence that are about his client that are worse than the truth. The takeaway from this is not that this video looks good for Mandi, it doesn't, but that her own lawyer is willing to lie to harm her and spread false gossip about his client that is worse than the actual truth. So he's willing to say things that aren't even true that hurt his client. But let's go into the half dozen ways that I know that Mandi wanted to testify against Scott Love as far back as around May 2018, and also to testify on her own behalf at her own trial. So back in 2018, Mandi said 3 things. First of all, Kaylee Simmons came out with some crazy confession that she claimed Mandi told her, which was didn't fit any of the evidence. But I later found out, when I talked to Mandi in prison in 2023, that this crazy thing that Kaylee made up was actually based on a lot of crazy things that Mandi was actually saying. So Mandi said at this hearing that she did not tell Kaylee this story, but based on the crazy things Kaylee said, and they're being loosely based on the story Mandi told me in 2023 in prison, I believe that Kaylee did not invent this crazy nonsense completely invent it that doesn't fit the evidence, that she got some of it from Mandi. And the reason Mandi made up this story in 2018 was because it's the story she was going to tell to testify against Scott Love. And then when I called Mandi on the phone and told her that Kaylee had made a deal to claim that Mandi had confessed, Mandi's tone of voice was strange. And I was later able to put together, based on what Mandi said in prison, that the reason Mandi's tone of voice was strange was because she actually had told Kaylee part of that crazy story, just not the part that implicated Mandi. Mandi, it seems like, most likely told Kaylee a less favorable story than the truth about Scott Love. And she did that in maybe May or June of 2018. So it was Mandi's story. So then the third thing in 2018 that Mandi said was she hinted to me that her lawyers had told her the prosecutors were these nice people who wanted to offer her a deal. And so Mandi told me that she'd offered to, testify against Scott Love and Chris Dahl. But she really was wanted to, kind of keep it secret because she was afraid Chris Dahl would find out. And then in 2019, Mandi called me all in a stress around September because Ishnar Lopez Ramos and this other girl in the prison had come up with this fake claim that Mandi had confessed that I set up the robbery. And so Mandi called me all in distress, this Ishnar Lopez and this other girl, they came up there saying that I told them that you set up the robbery. And the reason why that stressed Mandi out, I fully confirmed when I talked to her in prison, is because Mandi was at that time wanting to testify against Scott Love. And so these other 2 girls in the prison claiming that Mandi said that I set up the robbery, not Chris Dahl and Scott Love, it was screwing up with what Mandi wanted to do at that time, which was testify against Scott Love. So the next thing that let me know that Mandi wanted to testify at her trial was I think it was the first day of the trial, or maybe it was the first real day after the first day of jury selection. So I think it was the first real day of Mandi's trial after jury selection. Her lawyer Bart comes up to me in the back of the courtroom and he says, we're not gonna have Mandi testify because I think it's a trap. And I'm like, huh? But the way he said it to me, it was like there was some debate going on where somebody wanted Mandi to testify, but he didn't think she should. So I had no idea about this. But the way Bark said it, it made it seem like that there was some debate where Mandi wanted to testify, but he thought that she shouldn't testify, and he just assumed that I was privy to this debate. And so that let me know that there had been some ongoing debate which I wasn't privy to, but which Bark thought I was privy to, where somebody, presumably Mandi is what it seemed like, had wanted to testify, but he thought better of it. And then the final, most important thing that proves that Mandi wanted to testify against Scott Love is that she did go under oath at her trial and say Scott Love committed a murder.
Also, you heard the closing argument by your attorney, Mr. Bark, in regards to the murder was committed and indicating that a murder was committed, that it was conducted by Scott Love, not yourself, and you heard that.
Yes, ma'am.
Mandi's lawyers were wanting to promote a narrative that made it seem worse than what evidence actually suggests Scott Love really did. So Judge Rexedler did not seem to believe that there was really a murder, so she made Mandi go under oath. She goes, wait, hold on a minute, you talked to your lawyers about this? Are you really wanting to say there was a murder? And Mandi was eager. She went right on there, she said, yes, Scott Love is a murderer. She went right under oath at her own damn trial against the wishes of her lawyer and against the doubt of Judge Rexedler to say what the evidence didn't even support, that Scott Love committed a murder. Now, the reason why Mandi did this, she told me in prison, she was angry at Scott for all kinds of things. But the two reasons that were already there in 2018 why she wanted to testify against Scott Love were the exact reasons that everybody was telling her to testify against Scott Love, because at Scott's police interview he said that, I don't know anything about no James Mulrenin, but Mandi would know him. Mandi's involved with these strip club guys. Go look at Mandi.
Yeah, maybe the name Jim or James doesn't ring a bell, but people also call him GQ. You ever heard of it, GQ?
Maybe. My girlfriend's a dancer, so, you never...
She would probably know him.
And then when they showed Scott video of him and Mandi using the credit cards at Walmart, Scott said, that's Mandi, but that's not me. That's maybe some other guy.
Is that Mandi there? Could be. It's kind of blurry, but...
Yeah. Is that you and Mandi?
Not me. He looks a lot taller than I am.
Yeah? No?
No, I try to keep my head pretty shaved all the time.
Yeah.
So, if you see any pictures of me, it's always clean.
You know who that guy is? Who would Mandi have been with?
God, I don't know.
Your boyfriend, girlfriend?
Yeah. So, if she was with somebody, that's definitely news to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So everybody been saying, Mandi, this dude's saying it was you. He's saying, you'd know Mulrenin, but he wouldn't. That's Mandi at Walmart, but it's not me. And, Mandi saw that, and it made her angry, and in 2018, she was angry at Scott for saying that against her, and she was seeing everybody lie about her and getting deals, and as a result, Mandi in 2018 wanted to testify against Scott Love. Okay, so Mandi's lawyers, by coincidence, used the exact narrative at trial that Mandi claims now to have wanted to testify to, but they claim, we didn't get it from her. Mandi's lawyers were right to not have her testify in the condition she was in, the things that she was probably going to say. But it was necessary for her to testify, so it was their job to fix that up and fix up her ability to testify. And the reasons they didn't is not the subject of this video. The reality is Mandi's testimony was as good as anybody else's, but it wasn't helped and supported like everybody else's because it didn't support what would be considered the socially preferred outcome, and therefore to help and support this particular testimony would conflict with the social order of the county.